Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Monday, August the 26th, 2024. So here's a look at the latest GOES 16 true color visible satellite imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. There will be a link in the description below this video. And as we can see here on the satellite imagery, we do have an area that we are going to have to watch over the next several days. There's a lot of thunderstorms down here, which means there's increasing convergence along this intertropical convergence zone that is draped roughly at about 10 to 15 degrees north in latitude. And much of the modeling, including the ensembles, are indicating that this area could have an opportunity of developing into our next tropical depression or storm over the next 7 to 10 days. And anyone living on the greater and lesser Antilles, including the Windward Islands here, needs to monitor the progress of this system as this is just beginning to evolve in rapid fashion. So now, here's a look at the latest 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. They update this at least 4 times a day, and right now they are not expecting any tropical development in the next 7 days. But what I'm about to show you all on our European ensemble, GEFS ensemble, and some of our operational runs do indicate that there could in fact be tropical development down here in the greater and lesser Antilles in the next 7 to 10 days. And I will show you that here in just a second. But for those that are going on vacation over the next, say, 5 to 7 days, everything looks good for the time being. If you're going on a cruise, if you're flying anywhere, looks good for right now. So with that being said, here's a look at your tropical weather forecast, the meat of this video. Will this tropical wave develop into our next tropical depression, storm, or hurricane? So here's a look at the European model, taking a look at the central main development region at our surface wind plot. Here is Guadeloupe over here. Here are the US and British Virgin Islands. Puerto Rico is kind of cut in half here on the image. And then here's Barbados. You got Trinidad and Tobago down here. And then you got Martinique, and you got some of your other islands over here, including Guadeloupe. So you know pretty much where you're looking at here, the Windward, Greater, Lesser Antilles region in the central MDR. So going forward, we can see here in the next 5 days, this is our disturbance that we are monitoring closely. Some of the models are now beginning to pick up on this, especially the European deterministic forecast. We're not seeing just this on our ensembles, which I will show you here in a second or in a little bit, but now it's appearing on our deterministic, which is pretty crucial here in forecasting these systems. Now, when we look at yesterday's model run just 24 hours ago, we can see the difference here. This was not looking much like a system at all, more like a very weak tropical wave. But now in today's model run, this is the 12Z run of August the 26th, we can see a huge difference that it makes in 24 hours. Now we have winds here near tropical depression force on the northern side, but not necessarily a tropical depression at this moment. So now what is this wave going to do once it approaches the greater and lesser Antilles? Well, let's move this forward here. This is for the last day of August. Keep in mind, 31st of August, we could get our next named storm. Perhaps we'll see if the NHC does anything with it. Probably not going to do that. We'll wait until probably September 1st when this actually has a tropical depression-like designation on it. You can see the increasing wind field here approaching these islands. Again, this is about 6 or so days away, 6.5 days. And then once we go into day 7, by Monday morning, September the 2nd, the second day of September, we're looking at even stronger winds here, perhaps reaching tropical depression or storm force. And then look at this. This gets even stronger by the 3rd of September. Beyond the 7-day time frame, that is what we're watching. Now we can see on the 0Z run from last night, it did have that type of signal, that tropical wave, but this one is a little bit more aggressive at showing now a closed surface low, similar to Tropical Storm Debbie when Ernesto, excuse me. When it's similar to Tropical Storm Ernesto as it moved over literally the same location. So we will see if this pulls a Ernesto 2.0 or if this will do another barrel-like situation. as it moves maybe into the Caribbean. But we can see the last 3 model runs really upticking this. You can see 24 hours ago, the 0Z run from last night, and now look at this. We got a very much huge uptrend here on the euro. So it's going to be worth noting here as we go in the next several runs. Does this trend continue, and do we end up with maybe a stronger tropical storm? Now, as we do look at the Greater Antilles, this wave could get near Puerto Rico, which, by the way, here's Puerto Rico with winds of about, say, tropical storm force, and that's the furthest out this model goes. But I want to warn you all, this is now beginning to develop. New data is just beginning to develop on this system, so we don't exactly know. This is 10 days out, the 5th of September. Will it be north of Puerto Rico? Will it be south of Puerto Rico? Could Jamaica get impacted? Could the Dominican Republic get impacted? Right now, there is a 1% chance of those chances occurring, since this is newly developing in the model field right now. But there is a signal there, and we'll show you the ensembles. Looking at the icon model, similar outcome here over the next 4 days. Again, showing that system developing here to the east of the Lesser Antilles. And then look what happens. Look at it, develops just like the euro, but now this model is a little further north, but showing winds of about 38 to 40 miles an hour. So that is tropical storm intensity in the next 7 days. So we will really have to pay close attention to this seriously, because this could be one of those systems that does develop in quick fashion. And then maybe another system, I don't want to get ahead of myself, maybe another system beyond that. And what I'm looking for is that wind maximum to the south. We get these winds that curl all the way around like that. We'll see if that actually ends up being the case on the euro. Right now, the euro is quickly developing and quickly evolving in the last few model runs. See if that kind of sticks. Maybe 2 waves to look forward to, unfortunately, for these islands. But we can see in the next 180 hours, there's the euro, and here is the icon. Similar positions, actually, only the icon's a little further north. Another product that I wanted to show you too about this, it's not just about the wind, but the rainfall could be fairly intense depending on exactly where this develops and where it heads. Right now on the 12Z European model, we can see lots of heavy rainfall and possible some flood concerns there for September the 3rd into the 4th. So again, the first kind of few days of September could start off active here with this system. And yeah, some of the rainfall rates there exceeding 5 inches in a 6-hour period. So rainfall rates about 3/4 of an inch an hour. And then eventually, if this develops in our core, you could see much more rainfall. But thankfully, this is just off the coast of Puerto Rico, but could still bring quite a bit of impacts to these islands. But again, where and when it develops will be very important. Also, as far as the surf goes, will be dependent too on where and when this develops. You can see the surf increasing here in about a little past the 7-day mark, with surf anywhere between 9 to 12 feet over the center. And then along the coast here of some of these islands, you could see surf building about 5 to 7 feet. And then as this moves over, you can see surf building up to 12 to 14 feet. So elevated surf for right now. I'm not going to jump the gun on this just yet, since this is new data coming in just about an hour ago. But elevated surf, some flood potential possible with this, and some breezy to gusty winds anticipated as this wave moves further west. So we'll keep an eye on this as this develops. But now, about our ensembles? These are our ensemble member-wise minimum central pressures. Don't freak out. You're going to see a lot of chaos on the model, folks. You're going to see multiple hurricanes, maybe major hurricanes, but these are one individual member. Okay, there's 51 members that run the European ensemble, and each member has its different way of predicting things, right? It's like 51 different people with 51 different opinions, right? Maybe you predict it's going to be a Cat 5, but maybe someone, based on the current state of the atmosphere, maybe it's just going to be a Cat 1 or maybe a tropical depression, right? So that's kind of what this illustrates. So we can see, of course, in the next 7 days, yeah, there's a fairly strong signal here. Definitely notable there on the ensemble. We have a couple of members that bring this a little further west, a little sooner. And then look what really happens. Things really blossom here. after the 7-day, 8-day period, by day 10, look at this. We could see we're looking at a really big signal here with potential tropical storm intensity, major hurricane intensity here. And of course, do I rarely go beyond the 10-day period? This is kind of your chaos theory. You can see just a lot going on out there. This is what we look for. Even so, the GFS and the Canadian model not really indicating anything right now. The icon and the euro is indicating that signal really well on its deterministic forecast. So you can see with what that looks like right there. Just a lot of tracks. In fact, if we want to look at the Europe or GEFS ensemble as well, we can show you the same thing. There is a signal there, okay, in about a little over 7 days away. Definitely a signal there on the GEFS ensemble. And then, of course, when you go out further, definitely a lot of uncertainty in the next 10 days. But there is that signal, and that's what we really, really look for. So now, what about the shear? If this does develop, could it become our next big system? Well, right now, there's a lot of room for error in the shear forecast here. This is a deep layer shear from about 5,000 feet all the way up to about 37,000 feet. So looking at a deep layer of the atmosphere, because the atmosphere is 3-dimensional and not 2-dimensional. So we can, one layer affects the other layers. So we can see here the shear. Now, what I'm looking for is this is where our system is located, right in here. So what I'm looking for here is outflow. So these shear vectors are radiating outward. We're not seeing shear vectors that are cutting across like this, where we get like this, where we get kind of like this dominant outflow on one side of the shear vector. Instead, we're seeing kind of that outflow. So this is a fairly low shear environment in the next 7 days. And then once we go into the Caribbean, the shear remains fairly low. If we look at 200 millibars, though, we do have a little bit of southerly flow in the upper levels, and then a little bit, just a hair of westerly flow at less than about 15 knots. And when we look at the lower levels here, really not a whole lot of shear to speak of. Maybe about 10 or 15 knots of shear, but I don't think it's going to be enough to prevent this thing of organizing. We saw what Debbie did. Despite some shear, we saw what Ernesto did. Despite the shear, right? It was still able to develop. All right, shear is not like, oh, if you get 15 knot shear, we're not going to get development. We'll get some kind of development, and that's what we expect here. And then out to 10 days, of course, if this moves into the Puerto Rico area, into say if you're in the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, the shear is going to be anywhere between about 10 to 15 knots, maybe a little stronger, because we do have a little bit of a tutzel. If we look at our upper level winds, you can see westerly winds. Even at 300 millibars, we do have those winds that come in out of the southwesterly direction. So there is some sort of shear here, but of course, that is 10 days out, and a lot can change between now and September 5th. Now, what is this wave going to look like on satellite? This is the simulated IR satellite imagery from the Euro model, and we can see there is our wave. Yes, our well-defined tropical wave on the satellite imagery, which is important because simulating this, right, if we go back in time, this is kind of what it looks like right now, kind of a jumbled mess. As we go forward in time, we can see that wave does try to take on some dominacy. And then look at this. It tries and tries to get better defined in about 5 days. And then once we go into about day 7, there is our tropical wave. And keep in mind, here's another one of those blobs of convection as well. We're really going to have to start watching the tropics as we go past day 7. And look what happens. Look at this. Right over the central Atlantic area, you can see right there, the main development region, that blob of deep convection, that is our tropical wave. And it does get pretty intense. Look at this. If we go to our Lesser Antilles, definitely looks like to be like a little bit of a mid-level eye that tries to develop there with some deep convection on this imagery. So yeah, we're going to really need to watch this one. This is something that we're not going to ignore as long as it remains, the signal is strong. So now, why could this actually develop? Here's a look at our 700 millibar relative humidity plot. This is not the deep layers. Unfortunately, Weather Bell does not provide like what Tropical Tidbits does, because on Tropical Tidbits, the 12Z run is not out yet. So it's delayed on their end. So we're going to have to use a paid version website to view that. So there's not a whole lot of moisture, or a lot of dry air to the north, other than just this little bit and a little bit over here. This is in a fairly moist envelope at even 700 millibars. So at 10,000 feet, we go up to about, say, 500 millibars at 18,000 feet above the surface. We do have a little bit of dry air, and this is the shear that could make this a little lopsided. We will see about that. The little details are yet to be ironed out. This has not even developed yet, so there's going to be a lot of wiggle room here. 300 millibars, still a lot of moisture there, and not a whole lot of drier air within this environment. So that's why I think this has definitely some potential of development. Now, what is the European ensemble telling us over the next 7 days? Is this likely to develop, or is it not likely to develop? Again, take note of the deterministic forecast, which aims it like that, okay? So there is definitely a signal here. These blue tracks do indicate pressures below 999 millibars. So this would be a tropical depression or storm on the European ensemble. But look at the signal here. There's definitely some of these members are picking up on this wave developing east of the Lesser Antilles over the next 7 days. Now let's go into day 8, right there, next 8 days. We can see more of these members show maybe a hurricane, these red tracks, hurricane intensity perhaps moving close or within the Greater and Lesser Antilles. And as we go forward here in the next 10 days, very important here, yeah, there is definitely enough of these members indicating a high-end tropical storm or a hurricane. And look at this. One member explicitly shows a major hurricane, a Cat 4 hurricane perhaps, but that would be well to the northeast of the Leeward and Windward Islands, so I would not worry about that member at all. But you can see here is the signal that we're looking for, and this is within 10 days, and this is more to be believed as we get into our favorable period in the Atlantic. And then our next 15 days, way far out. I know this is probably more likely fantasy land, but yes, look at this. We get a spread, a model spread that aims this either into the northeastern Gulf of Mexico or aims this basically to the north, just to the east of the Bermuda area. So yeah, we will have to be watching this wave for at least a couple of weeks perhaps as this continues to move west and it does develop. And then of course, there are more members coming off of Africa indicating more tropical development. We will see about that as that gets closer. All right, because again, we are nearing that peak. Again, this is the morning of September the 10th, which is climatology speaking, the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season. So what is a GEFS also indicating? Definitely in the next 15 days, also indicating a lot of development here near the Leeward and Windward Islands. But also some of the members take this very far to the east. So we have a track like this, or we have a track like this, or even in extreme cases, right into the Gulf of Mexico. So the GEFS, a lot more uncertain about this wave developing. And it's not to be surprised because the deterministic forecast not indicating anything developing out there in the Atlantic in the next 2 weeks, which is probably a little bit of an understatement given our signals that I'm just showing you. And here is one of those signals. This is a look at the ensemble probabilistic tropical depression chances here. This is very important, and we can see clearly there is more than a 50% chance. There is in fact an 80% chance here that a tropical depression could form. Look at this, near home where these islands are. Yes, this includes you folks on Barbados. This includes you all living on these Leeward, Windward Islands, including for Puerto Rico. There is a 50 to 60% chance of tropical development there based on the European ensemble. And of course, Jamaica, there's a 0% chance for the time being. But again, that's because in 10 days, the system gets over here just south of Puerto Rico. And if it moved in this general direction, you would have literally 2 weeks to get prepared for this, up to 2 weeks perhaps. Now, the chances of tropical storm force winds, as we zoom this in, Yeah, look at that. There is a 20% chance of this becoming a tropical storm. So I would not be surprised from the National Hurricane Center if they do highlight an area in their next outlook. I would bet you probably about a 10% chance in the next 7 days once they get more data. And that would probably be for 8 o'clock tonight when they do their next tropical weather outlook on their end. All right. Now, of course, I did discuss this in my last several videos. Upper ocean heat content is not a problem with this tropical wave. If it goes this general direction and moves along these islands, yeah, there's a lot of upper ocean heat content to work with. But if this moves further south into the central Caribbean and then passes just to the south of Jamaica and then moves into the Gulf of Mexico, there's a lot of upper ocean heat content ahead of this with sea surface temperatures in the upper 80s in this area. So this is something to not mess with. And if this passes just to the north of, say, Puerto Rico and the northeastern Caribbean, this would still be moving over a lot of upper ocean heat content. And look at this, even Ernesto has the sea surface temperatures and the upper ocean heat content is quickly recovering from where Ernesto went through. So definitely something to really monitor over the next 7 days as this tropical wave develops. Now, of course, if you found this video very informative, very detailed, and very helpful, please consider subscribing if you haven't already, folks. I tried my best at not jumping the gun this time, but I'm telling you, the signals are there. It's a pretty strong signal on our ensembles. That's why we're going to really have to start talking about this. I'm sure other YouTubers are already bringing this up, which I fully understand. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I would really recommend doing so right now, hitting the like button and sharing this video with your family and friends on social media. And lastly, ring the bell notification icon to get my latest blog posts, videos, and live streams, including shorts feed here on the YouTube channel. As always, have a great rest of your Monday on the 26th here of August. I will be back with you more tomorrow, and I will be doing updates on this every single day this coming week, as long as this remains an imminent threat of development.